Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Sir Hunt on X on this 21st of October, 2025, coming to you live from Cincinnati, Ohio, in the United States of America. Here's hoping everyone has themselves a wonderful day today. Lots to get to here tonight. Wild stuff, especially from Russell Wilson and Sean Payton. I'll touch on that here in a minute. Also, the Oleksandr Usyk fans still going on about his place in history. I got to straighten them out a little bit. The legacy of Aaron Pryor. And among many other things, fully loaded show, one of the most loaded I've had in a bit. I'm going to get right down to it. Of course, last night it was the Monday night doubleheader. We'll start with what took place in Detroit. Lions answered the call after getting punked by Kansas City, handling the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. First of all, get well soon, Mike Evans. That was just unfortunate what happened to him with the collarbone injury. They said he's likely done for the season. Hate to see that. Tampa Bay was my NFC representative in the Super Bowl. That part doesn't look good right now with this, obviously, but I'm not going to jump off of it. But the Detroit defense stepped up, put the clamps on the Tampa Bay offense, and Jahmyr Gibbs showed the world why he should be the number one running back over there in Detroit now. There should be no questions with how he just decimated the Tampa Bay defense, and Detroit got themselves on the right track a little bit after how they lost last week at Kansas City. Now, the interesting thing about the NFC before I touch on the other part, there's 7 teams in the playoffs, obviously. Green Bay's 4-1-1. You know, they got the one tie. They get that one seed because they had the bye. 2 through 7, every team is 5-2. That means you're going to have at least 3. There at least. If you have a 4-2 record in the NFC right now, if the playoffs started today, if your record is 4-2 or 4-3, you're not in the playoffs. Shows you how very competitive and wild the NFC is going into the season. It was the same way last season. Remember, the Seattle Seahawks went 10-7 and missed the playoffs because of some odd-looking tiebreaker with the Los Angeles Rams. So the NFC this year is looking mighty, mighty tough. And I don't know who's going to come out of the NFC. I had Tampa Bay as my pick. I'm still holding on to it, but barely and clinging. But it's a tough look, losing Mike Evans, and it's not looking good. But from the Detroit point of view, you got back on the right track. Your offense got cooking a lot better this week than it did. We talked about after you lost to Kansas City last week, where you guys just got punked. Game wasn't as close as the score was. But good bounce back win at home. Tampa Bay, they're going to eventually be fine, hopefully. Hopefully they get Chris Godwin back because you can't rely on Cade Otton and Emeka Egbuka to be the only 2 targets for Baker Mayfield moving forward. So, big win for Detroit. Keeps themselves in the AFC North race with the Green Bay Packers, and we'll see what happens moving forward. The NFC is going to be a dogfight. As I said, right now, the 7 top teams in the playoffs. Of course, Green Bay's 4-1-1 with the tie with Dallas, and the other 6 teams are 5-2. We'll see what happens moving forward because this is going to be a wild race in the NFC playoff hunt. I mean, it's crazy that the 7th seed is 5-2. Think about that for a minute, because the NFC is going to be very, very wild. Now, you talk about the second game of the double header. It's Seattle just beating up Houston. Right now, everyone is on the Jaxon Smith-Njigba bandwagon, understandably so. I mean, the guy leads the league in receiving yards, and we talk about what he's done up to this point. The perfect target for Sam Darnold and that offense. And we talk what he did to the Houston Texans defense last night was absolutely astounding. We consider how good Houston's defense has been over the years. But once again, we're having another conversation from the Houston angle as to, 1, how good C.J. Stroud really is, and 2, whether or not this offensive line is good enough to protect him. Because once again, he got the business last night. We talk about C.J. Stroud. I think he's good, but there seems to be a total issue when it comes to the basics and the fundamentals where you talk about the particulars of these Green Bay Packers. It's going to be the Seattle Houston Texans. Sorry, I had a bit of a flicker in my video. But we talk about the Seattle Seahawks and that defense. That's the imprint that they were looking for when Mike Macdonald came from Baltimore. And maybe the biggest mistake Baltimore made was not promoting him to head coach and letting him walk to Seattle. Because that's what happened. Look at Baltimore's defense as a result, and look at Seattle's defense now. Because Seattle's in the middle of a playoff hunt, and Mike Macdonald's doing the job up there. Certainly they're running for Coach of the Year. We talk about what they're doing up there in Seattle, and turning Sam Darnold to some kind of a competent NFL quarterback. That's saying a heck of a whole lot. Big home win for Seattle, especially after going cross-country to shock Jacksonville. And they are moving forward. When you talk about the NFC West, in the middle of the race with San Fran and the Rams, a three-headed monster right there, with Arizona just slowly fading into the sunset. But those three teams right now, the 49ers, Rams, and Seahawks, it's going to be dogfight for who wins that title, NFC West title. Wouldn't be surprised if they send at least two teams into the playoffs because that division is looking real good. And we talk about Jaxon Smith-Njigba. Now we have morons who are ignorant enough to put him in the same conversation as the top wide receivers in the game. I'll give you top 10. That's it. Who are you going to put him over? You can't put him over Justin Jefferson, who's the gold standard of NFL wide receivers right now. And, of course, there's Jamar Chase here in Cincinnati. Puka Nacua, of course, Emeka Ibuka, and CeeDee Lamb, when he's healthy, he's as good as anyone. I mean, Jaxon Smith-Njigba is a monster. I mean, I saw it at Ohio State. I mean, we saw what he could do over there in Ohio State. There's no doubt about it. But when we talk about what he's done up to this point, I mean, to put him in that conversation after just how he's exploded so far, people need to chill out a little bit. I think he'll eventually get there. I think eventually will. The way he runs routes, especially out of the slot wide receiver, is just absolutely phenomenal. And the connection Sam Darnold has with him is great. And we talk about where he stands in the plethora of wide receivers. He's up there. I just want to put him in the conversation with guys like Jefferson, Chase, or Nacua yet. He finishes the rest of the season this way, I can assure you, we will be having the conversation. But for now, let's hold it for a little bit. Some people want to anoint him number one. That's insanity talk. I think a lot of it is rage bait to rile up the Bengals fans, which I'll touch on them here in a minute. But let's not go that far yet. He's rolling. He's cooking. He's doing well. Him and Sam Darnold have an excellent two-man combination going on up there at the northwestern part of the country. And up there at the link, they're loving it. And he's just absolutely phenomenal the way he's just running routes and just burning secondaries for big plays. He's just absolutely phenomenal right now. And when we talk about all the NFL games, before I touch on the wild craziness that's been going on today and the last few days, one topic that everyone does not like, and is, again, just put the internet under explosion, is the moronic thing that's going on. It goes on NFL games. It started with the NBA, especially way back when Greg Popovich used to just troll this. It's an idiotic idea that you're going to have in-game interviews, during the games, in the quarters and the halves. I trace back to what the perfect one that took place at the 2022 AFC wildcard game when Baltimore came to Cincinnati, when John Harbaugh was interviewed by Melissa Stark during the game. I like the heck out of Melissa Stark, one of the respected reporters, especially we talk about females in the broadcasting field. But John Harbaugh said it best. I can't do this interview. Let me go catch my game. We'll talk about this later. In fact, we still have this ideology of having this. It is absolutely mind-boggling to me when you talk about why this is going on. It's one of the most in-game interviews. It's one of the most despicable things I've seen or heard. There's a reason why Greg Popovich just trolls this every chance he gets. It just gives you just 3 words or less answers because the thing is just absolutely stupid. I mean, it really is. And it goes to the NFL, the way trying to catch coaches during interquarter missions or half times. It's not a good thing. I'm not a fan of it. A lot of people aren't a fan of it. I mean, I'm with them. I'm not either. I think it's absolutely moronic, whoever came up with this idea, and I don't know what's accomplished out of it, because they're not going to give you the whole game plan on a microphone over a television set, in the middle of a game, because, where's it going to get you? This thing needs to be outed. This thing is absolutely stupid. You want to know how to handle it? Look at what John Harbaugh did at the 2022 wild card game at Cincinnati. That's how you handle an in-game interview. People need to take notes out of that. Just basically said, I'll talk to you later. I have a game to coach. Got to leave the coaches alone too, because just like players have games to play, coaches have games to coach. They should have to be able to do that. Yeah, I'm not a fan of that thing either. It's just absolutely stupid. Now to what's gone on here over the last few days. And apparently y'all want to drag me into it. I'll go ahead and tell it like it is. It's the cowardice of Bengals fans once again who are overreacting to a win that was basically irrelevant. I mean, you got the win over Pittsburgh, but can you guys just shut up and move on to the Jets? Because you guys are just cowards right now, just still attacking Steelers fans 3 days after a game that's basically irrelevant. It was an irrelevant win for beginners. Why? Because you went from 2-4 to 3-4 against a team who's 4-2. Any team who's 3-4 and still talking is just the biggest group of cowards who are just living miserable, empty lifestyles that's not even worth talking to or talking about. That's what it is. I mean, anybody see me doing that? No. I did my celebration at the stadium, and the second my foot left the stadium and headed to the parking lot, I was ready to focus on the Jets. Problem is, there's so many cowards in the Bengals fan base and the Cincinnati media and the Bengals community that don't know how to conduct general human beings, and as a result, they show their cowardice in person at the game, and they show their cowardice on the internet, per usual, still acting like beating Pittsburgh was a big deal, throwing it in the face of Steelers fans, and a despicable and disgraceful act of cowardice you could just possibly display. You better hope you beat the winless Jets this coming Sunday, because if you don't, you're going to get it, and I'm going to make sure you guys get it, because of how you carry yourselves since winning that game Thursday night, and it was an electric game. It was a phenomenal game. I was there. I was a privilege to witness it. It was just an awesome game. But if you're going to carry yourselves like cowards throughout the week, attacking Steelers fans for no reason on an irrelevant win, and you lose to the Jets, and we've seen how the story goes. If you lose to the Jets, I don't want to be you guys, because they're going to be people be coming at you left and right, given how you carried yourselves the last few days over an irrelevant win against an irrelevant opponent, because you guys want to act like cowards, acting like it was the greatest thing you ever saw. You guys will act worse after this win than you guys did when you went upset Kansas City in a gift-wrapped AFC Championship game in 2021. I mean, you guys acted like this, but not quite to this level. You guys find a way to put yourselves on people's throats, and the biggest act of cowardice I've ever seen and ever witnessed. And not even Mike Tyson fans were this bad when I covered the sport of boxing, and they were quite bad. You guys find a way to make yourselves worse, especially after how you've carried yourselves over the last few days after getting an irrelevant win against Pittsburgh. I mean, it's one thing to do it after you won an AFC title game at Kansas City. It's another thing to do it in an irrelevant win week 7 when you're basically 3-4 right now, and basically with a fan base with empty and nothing to show for it. I get it, but do better than this. Just because you won a game doesn't give you a right to carry yourselves like cowards on the internet or in person. You beat the Steelers. It's over with. Move on to the Jets, because you better beat the Jets coming up Sunday. Because if you don't, it's going to be a big-time embarrassment after how you carry yourselves as cowards from the night you beat the Steelers up to this point. The fact you guys are still ongoing with this kind of a despicable behavior says a lot about you guys at the end of the day. And there's a reason why I don't partake in it with you guys, because I said when I left that stadium, the second my feet stepped out of that stadium, my focus was on the Jets. Maybe you guys need to stop acting like cowards and do the same thing. It'll help you guys a ton. I've been talking about this more coming forward. But carrying yourselves like cowards doesn't necessarily mean beating let me back up here. Just because you got an irrelevant win on a Thursday night tilt doesn't give you a right to carry yourselves like cowards and keep this thing going as long as possible. You didn't win a Super Bowl. You didn't win a playoff game. You just won an irrelevant Week 7 game, because you're 3-4, and that's all it is. As Bill Parcells would eloquently say, your record says what you are. And right now, you guys are a 3-4 team. You guys need to shut up and quit acting like cowards. Focus on the Jets this Sunday. And speaking of the Jets, once again, owner Woody Johnson makes a fool out of himself, saying that he's parts of the Jets are being turned around under head coach Aaron Glenn. But he says he's not filled with the quarterback position because of quarterback rating. He's saying he's not thrilled with the Justin Fields because of his quarterback rating. Think about it. He said he's not thrilled with Justin Fields because of his quarterback rating. The same owner who apparently vetoed a trade not too long ago because of Madden ratings. And there's a reason why, since that guy took over, that franchise has been a laughingstock. Let me trace back a couple decades ago here real quick before I further proceed to this. If you remember, before he took over, it was the Bill Parcells, Bill Belichick duo over there. And of course, we know the whole shebang where New England wanted to hire Bill Belichick. The Jets said no. And of course, it turned into a wild fiasco. And then eventually, they figured something out. But when you watch the documentary, The Two Bills on 30 for 30 with Parcells and Belichick, Belichick said that the ownership configuration, which was a transitional phase after the passing of then owner Leon Hess to what turned out to be now Woody Johnson, was why he didn't want the Jets job. Maybe at the end of the day, Belichick saw something nobody did. And he's seeing it now. And at the end of the day, what he said about that is why the Jets are who the Jets are. And I thought the Bengals were a clown show for many years. They found a way to out-clown the Bengals. And that's saying a heck of a whole lot. Especially when you have an owner who makes the moronic statement saying quarterback ratings are why I should be playing a particular quarterback. Congratulations. You just made a fool out of yourself again. And, you know, it's not just the first time with this. We talk about how he vetoed a trade for the QB ratings, how he has been basically mismanaging the franchise since he took over, basically kept GM Joe Douglas for the longest time to where it was past his expiration date before he sent Douglas out the door, which was about 3 or 4 years past his expiration date. And we know about the Aaron Rodgers saga, which looks like at the end of the day, it was more a Jets thing than a Rodgers thing. Now, it's not to exempt Aaron Rodgers, but it's more of a Jets thing because look at that franchise since Woody Johnson took over, and look at where they're at now as a result. And because of it, the Jets are, as the late Dennis Green would say, they are who we thought they are. And this time, we're not going to let them off the hook because that's what you have as a result of all of this. Because the Jets, I mean, they're toying with a winless season. I mean, the only winnable game they have possibly have a winning game coming up is this Sunday against the Bengals because of the cowardice of Bengals fans. That's the only possible winnable game they have. It's but like because of the fan base carrying themselves like cowards in Cincinnati. That's the only reason why it's winnable. But after that, good luck down the line, New York Jets. If you don't get this one, you might possibly flirt with an 0-17 season, and it's going to be a walking embarrassment. That's what I got to say about that. But maybe the problem is Woody Johnson at the end of the day. Bill Belichick said the ownership configuration was a problem. That's why he left. And because of it, that's why he went with him. And that's why Belichick went out. I don't blame him. Now, before I proceed into boxing, I'm going to talk about the beef that's still ongoing between Sean Payton and Russell Wilson. You guys know the quarterback wide receiver duo in Denver at one point. We know Sean Payton was never a fan of Russell Wilson, more outspokenly than ever, but took it to a higher level Sunday after being gift-wrapped a win against the Giants in a game they were just hopelessly behind. And apparently he said he talked to John Mara, the Giants owner or GM, whatever the heck his position is, basically saying, I wish you would have waited till after our game to bench Russell Wilson for Jaxson Dart. You guys know a few games before it, they made the decision to bench Russell Wilson for the rookie Jaxson Dart. And Sean Payton wanted it to be longer. And after hearing that part of the clip, Russell Wilson basically tweeted it and basically called him classless, calling him out and having a bounty game on him still years later. Well, let's start with this real quick. We know Russell Wilson's a bit of an odd character. I mean, we know this. I mean, it was back here in Seattle. Basically, his career plummeted after he threw that intentional interception of Malcolm Butler in the Super Bowl that cost him the back-to-back Super Bowls. It was the most intentional turnovers you'll ever see in NFL history. But let's not act like Sean Payton is some saint because he's one of the bigger cowards in the NFL community when you consider what took place in 2009 when he was with the Saints. What he did there. I mean, we know the story was told. And he's still going to carry the act into Denver with his press conference and how he acted with this particular press conference. Still one of the bigger cowards in the NFL community. And look at how his tenure ended in New Orleans after Bannygate. Some embarrassing playoff losses, especially one at home against the Minnesota Vikings, where he couldn't even call a play more than 3 yards at a time, and I don't know what was on his mind at that point. When it comes to these two, it's a case of maybe both guys deserve each other, but in the same sentence, both guys should just stay away from each other, because we know how toxic it was, especially consider a couple of the public outlashings that Sean Payton had for Russell Wilson during their times in Denver together, which was caught on cameras all over the place, especially a late season game in Detroit, which went real viral. That didn't sit well with Russell Wilson. And we know Russell Wilson takes a higher road with this. And for him to make the tweet that he did to respond to what Sean Payton had to say says tons about the situation. And Russell Wilson usually is one of a religious person who basically says, I'll let the man upstairs handle it. But it says a lot about the character of Sean Payton to drive a guy like Russell Wilson to say the things that he did on Twitter today about the particular head coach. And as a result, that's why we had what we had at the end of the day. But, Sean Payton is who he is at the end of the day. His true colors came out years back with Bannygate, and we know what happened there in the NFL community in one of the most criminally disgusting acts you'll ever conduct. Also, didn't help that Russell Wilson, who at times was a diva, Seattle fans, Seattle players, especially Richard Sherman could tell you about that, didn't help his own cause either. So his career has been an apex ever since he threw that intentional interception of Malcolm Butler in the Super Bowl, which still requires a legit explanation. I don't care what the heck Pete Carroll had to say, because Pete Carroll just did what Pete Carroll had to do as a head coach. But these two, let them have their drama. But if Sean Payton still holds a grudge in Russell Wilson's head, it says a lot more about Sean Payton than it does Russell Wilson. Does a whole lot for someone to let Russell Wilson give a response to that, because usually he takes a higher road and walks away. Said more about the character of Sean Payton, which he's lacking and has still lacked since Bannygate way back when in that game against the Minnesota Vikings, where they were out to just permanently kill Brett Favre. It requires an explanation as to why Sean Payton would stoop to that low, being a coward. And he still doesn't want to explain it. It says a lot about him. That takes care of my NFL talk. Tomorrow night, I reveal my Week 8 picks. Still picking lots of toss-ups. Now to the world of boxing. And here we go. Second straight day. Oleksandr Usyk fans have their panties all up in a bunch still. Let me just straighten this up first real quick. And let me preface by saying one thing real quick. Oleksandr Usyk is my number one fighter pound for pound right now. Nothing fake about him. The real pound for pound number one fighter, the undisputed heavyweight champ. Still that until someone does something significant. And the premier fighter of this era. And I love Oleksandr Usyk. I go back to him. We talk about the pound for pound rankings. But we have idiots who still think this guy belongs in the top 10 all-time great category as a heavyweight. There's a lot of problems with this. I guess I have to go part 2 with this because everyone has their panties all up in a bunch in the boxing community. Let's start with this. Are you going to put him over Muhammad Ali? Are you going to put him over Joe Louis? Think about Ali and Louis for just a minute. He's about 2 of the top 4 all-time great, probably all-time great. Mount Rushmore, so we talk about all-time great, because that's what Oleksandr Usyk, is what Muhammad Ali and Joe Louis were. Now, let's eliminate that for the conversation, because that's not happening. Are you going to put him over Jack Johnson? And we know the barriers Jack Johnson crossed when he beat Tommy Burns to win the heavyweight championship in 1906 and had a decent run, including a decent run during that time. Good luck with that one. Are you going to put him over Jack Dempsey, who after he just demoralized Jess Willer, demoralized Jess Willer from start to finish in one of the most brutal one-sided beatdowns you'll see, and ruled the 20s, and we think of the roaring 20s, you thought of Jack Dempsey. Are you going to put Oleksandr Usyk over Jack Dempsey? How about George Foreman? Think about this. A guy who had 2 careers, by the way, not one career, 2 careers. Both times he ascended to become the heavyweight champion of the world. But first time, of course, when he just dodged off Joe Frazier effortlessly. And then in 1994, in a second career, came from behind and knocked out Michael Moore. You're going to put Oleksandr Usyk over George Foreman? I don't think so. Are you going to put him over Larry Holmes? 7.5-year reign, 20 successful title defenses. Basically cleaned out his era from 78 to 85, especially how he won the title, needing the terrific 15th round to beat Ken Norton and demoralizing Jerry Cooney a few years later. You going to put Alexander Usyk over Larry Holmes? Can you put him over Joe Frazier? I mean, the obliteration of guys like Bob Foster and Jimmy Ellis, especially the one on Ellis who won the heavyweight title. You're going to forget the epic trilogy, probably the greatest trilogy in sports history with Muhammad Ali, beating him the first time. That alone just puts him over there. You're going to put him over Alexander Usyk over Joe Frazier? How about the two fighters that were back into the 90s, Evander Holyfield and Lennox Lewis, who fought and cleaned basically the entire heavyweight division and basically became multiple time undisputed champ in their careers? How are you going to put Alexander Usyk over those guys? Let's go a little deeper here a little bit now. I'm going to cut down to the throat of this a little bit. Are you going to place him over Sonny Liston? And Sonny Liston, we know, just paintbrushed Floyd Patterson twice in one round. I mean, both fights paintbrushed him. It was the most effortless thing I ever saw. And Sonny Liston paintbrushed him twice. You're going to put Alexander Usyk over Sonny Liston? How about Floyd Patterson? Are you going to put him over a guy who was over Archie Moore, and of course his trilogy with Ignar Johansson? Are you going to put him over Floyd Patterson? Or even Ignar Johansson, for that matter, who had a solid heavyweight career? How about even the more modern all-time great heavyweight Vladimir Klitschko? Maybe a little somewhat comparable. We consider Klitschko had one of the three longest reigns in heavyweight title history. Are you going to put Alexander Usyk over Vladimir Klitschko? Here's one thing everybody misses, and it misses big time. Those names I mentioned did it as heavyweights from start to finish, had more significant accomplishments as heavyweights from start to finish, did it against elite 5 heavyweights from start to finish, and against more significant heavyweight championship fights from start to finish. The only 4 significant fights for Alexander Usyk as heavyweight. We're talking as heavyweight here. 2 against Anthony Joshua, 2 against Tyson Fury. Chaz Witherspoon, immediate disqualification. Don't count that. Tony Bellew, forget it. The 2 wins over Daniel Dubois. Daniel Dubois was a fake heavyweight champ. Immediate disqualification. I'm going to steal a quote from what Muhammad Ali said a long time ago when he talked about him and Sugar Ray Robinson. Muhammad Ali says, I am the greatest. But he talked about pound for pound greatest. That's Sugar Ray Robinson. I'm going to implement that with Alexander Usyk. Not an all-time great heavyweight because of the significance of the division. But pound for pound, when you talk about his run from the amateurs through cruiserweight and heavyweight, just the whole total body of work, pound for pound, you can put him anywhere you want. As a heavyweight, even just isolating his heavyweight resume, just his heavyweight resume, he doesn't stack up. Who are you going to knock out? And whoever you put in his place, you better have an explanation for it because you look like a fool when you do. And it's not a slight at Alexander Usyk. As I said, number 1 fighter pound for pound right now, premier fighter of this generation, premier big man of this generation, especially how he demolished Tyson Fury twice and Anthony Joshua twice. But your prisoner of the moment attitude is why the fight community has become a clown show in recent years. And it's stuff like that. I mean, you guys think one fight puts someone in an all-time great category when you don't even bother seeing through the details adequately and perfectly. And we have another case of this here when it comes to the placement of Alexander Usyk as a top flight all-time fighter. As I said, body work, career-wise, pound for pound is one thing. Isolating it as a heavyweight, it doesn't stack up. We have cowards in the fight community who think Alexander Usyk's career as a cruiserweight translates into a ranking as an all-time great heavyweight. That's an ignorant conversation that requires you to get checked for CTE because you're a blunt coward if you think that. No way I can put Alexander Usyk among the guys I mentioned. I mean, unless he has 25 more fights in the next 25 months as the undisputed heavyweight champ and wins them all by first round knockout, then we can have a conversation. But otherwise, he's a modern all-time great, and we'll just leave it at that. Trying to put him over guys who had longer runs in that weight class against significant opponents in significant title fights with significant circumstances is a total blatant disrespect, insult, and cowardly act you can do to the all-time greats who did it the right way in the heavyweight division. Shame on you. And I hate to be on the show to put down Alexander Usyk like that, and I don't like to because I said he's a guy I go to bat for when we talk about the best fighter in the world. I can't go back when we talk about putting this guy in the all-time great heavyweights because it's the biggest act of cowardice the fight community can do. And I'm talking real cowardice because you're insulting what Muhammad Ali did. You're insulting what Joe Louis did. You're insulting what Jack Johnson had to go through. And Jack Johnson went through a lot. Shut your mouth and do some research. And of course, back to Joe Louis. Look up the situation in the 2 fights with Max Schmeling. I can't even put Oleksandr Usyk over Max Schmeling for that matter. Think about what the 2 careers of George Foreman, what he went through to become the heavyweight champ. Think about what Joe Frazier went through in his trilogy with Muhammad Ali and how he managed to beat him in the first fight in 1971. And when the heavyweight division got hot in the 90s, think about everything Evander Holyfield and Lennox Lewis went through to get to the top of the heavyweight division. And they did it from start to finish as heavyweights. And not to mention the reign of Larry Holmes, who had all kinds of backlash after the fight with Muhammad Ali, which we know had no business taking place. And if you think Oleksandr Usyk belongs over Larry Holmes, you seriously need to check for CTE, because Larry Holmes went through hell and high water, in and out of the ring, criminally underrated still to this day. I can point more and more to this, but I'll be talking about this more because Oleksandr Usyk fans have this grotesque, psychotic, cowardly mindset to want to degrade and disrespect the all-time greats. And I'll just leave that be, because I've itched. When I take the new show to the whole new level and take the gloves off, the gloves are going to be coming off, and nobody's going to like it. I don't care who you are. I don't care what you are. If you're going to disrespect someone like that, come at me with it and tell me why it is. Don't tuck your tail between your legs and backpedal, because your cowardice is about to be called out, especially the fight community. I already did that with Mike Tyson fans back in the day. I do it all the time with Bengals fans here in Cincinnati. If I had to take it to that level, I'll do it. I can't wait till 2026 when I get this thing rolling. Now to a more peaceful segment. And this is about a Cincinnati icon. Happy heavenly birthday to Aaron the Hawk Pryor. A Cincinnati icon. Right there with Ezra Charles, Oscar Robertson, Johnny Bench, Joe Morgan, Barry Larkin, Anthony Munoz, Ken Anderson, and Lucho Acosta. Aaron Pryor's on that list. Born and raised on the west side of Cincinnati, Ohio, lived in parts of over the Rhine. Started his amateur career, got an amateur win over Thomas Hearns. Started pro early, lost at a trials to try and get the Olympics and couldn't make it. And when he started his career, managed to get a title shot after a long, hard-fought road against the standout Antonio Cervantes. After being floored in the first round, came up to demolish Cervantes as if the knockdown never happened. A few fights later, he had a fight against a Japanese contender named Akito Kamita. Same thing there. After he got floored in the first round, destroyed Kamita as if the knockdown didn't happen. Of course, it set up the 2 super fights with Alexis Arguello. And we know the story was that one. First fight, back and forth action. And of course, the dark cloud that still hovers over it with the give me the bottle of the one I mix. But it doesn't turn the fact that Pryor's an all-time great, just like Arguello was. And that was, the first fight was a 1982 fight of the year. And Ring Magazine called that the fight of the 80s. Understood. And we know what happened in the second fight. Both guys started to slow down, but Arguello was more slow down than Pryor. And Pryor just beat him down and stopped him. We know what happened to his life after that. Drug dependency, was forced to vacate the title. Tried to come back against an unknown fighter named Bobby Joe Young and was floored in 2 rounds on a punch that basically you couldn't even punch through a brick wall with. And of course, he tried a couple of other comebacks that never materialized. Found himself back into the Pickaway Correction Center for being found high in the streets of crack in the middle of Cincinnati. But maybe his biggest victory wasn't in the ring. It was outside the ring. Went from when he got out of the Pickaway Correction Center to the end of his life, which ended in 2016. Stayed clean, found God, and used that religion to go on a tour all over the country where you talk about spreading the message about what being clean, sober from drugs means to your life and a life-changing event. And Aaron Pryor, maybe his biggest win was staying clean and sober after he was found on the streets in the early 90s and was sent to Pickaway Correction Center and got out, got clean, opened his own gym in downtown Cincinnati, helped kids off the streets and show them how to fight. And of course, had a church somewhere in there also where he used his message to help out people who were struggling with substance abuse issues like he did during his career, and used that message to go not just in Cincinnati, but across the United States. It was basically a pioneer in that regard and a spokesperson and an advocate for it. We talk about Cincinnati Icons. We've had, and we know Cincinnati's had its own unique culture, and its own inner cult-like culture when it comes to sports. I said that the number one is still going to be Ezra Charles, but in the fight game, not far behind him, was none other than the Hulk, Aaron Pryor. And we talk about how he packed Riverfront Coliseum, especially the nights when he obliterated Antonio Cervantes and Akito Kamita. That should tell you what the legacy he left here in Cincinnati. And he'll always be beloved over here for the longest time. A phenomenal, phenomenal fighter. And we talk about his place among the all-time great junior welterweights, which is his division. I mean, it's not really a deep list because this came after the old school 8. But in that division, he's number 1. And we have Julio Cesar Chavez. You have Antonio Cervantes, the guy Pryor just wiped out. You have Costa Zoo, Ricky Hatton. Even go back, a couple guys, even a Barney Ross and a Tony Canzonori fought in that weight class. But I remind you, it was recognized as a legit division at the time when Ross and Canzonori fought in that weight class. But they're in that category also. Several others up there, but that's the list of the great junior welterweights. But when you talk about Aaron Pryor and his legacy, especially here in Cincinnati, one of the better ones that the city is ever going to see and ever know. And that's how great Aaron Pryor is. I mean, if you want to watch the footage, watch it out there. Rare case of a guy who puts power and speed together like none other. High punch volume, high maintenance type of fighter who just kept punching and punching and punching till you couldn't take it anymore. Which is simply what happened in the first fight with Alexis Arguello. He just kept coming and coming and coming. And that should just tell you right there what Aaron Pryor was made of as a fighter. Terrific, terrific fighter. The footage is out there. Yes, the dark cloud of the give me the bottle of the one I mix is always going to be hovering over Aaron Pryor. I get it. But that's who he was at the end. But doesn't deter the fact the guy is probably the top junior welterweight in boxing history. The record speaks for itself. May God rest the soul of Aaron Pryor. And I conclude on a historical moment that took place in Madison Square Garden 60 years ago tonight. And we talk about underrated fighters that don't get talked about enough. This was the 4th encounter of Dick Tiger versus Joey Giardello. They fought 3 previous times. Basically, it was 2-1 Giardello. The key was the 3rd fight that took place 2 years before this. Giardello won the undisputed middleweight championship in Atlantic City from the then defending champ Dick Tiger. So we had this 4th fight. And remind you, Giardello originally did not want to go through with this. He was trying to get other guys instead of Dick Tiger. But because the opponents went out and because other opponents decided to part their own different ways, we get the 4th fight of Joey Giardello and Dick Tiger. When you think about this, the 3rd fight, it was a fight where Joey Giardello just did virtually anything and everything he wanted to. But in the 4th fight, Dick Tiger turned the tables and showed the world why he's a top 15 all-time great middleweight. I mean, chiseled out of stone, one of the more hard-headed individuals, and a guy who was tough as nails, methodical, and what he did, one of the premier counterpunchers of that era, basically did that in the 4th fight to regain the middleweight championship 60 years ago today from Joey Giardello. And Joey Giardello is a stand-up middleweight himself. I mean, we talk about the career of Joey Giardello. Prior to losing this fight, he beat the stand-up Reuben Carter. And we know the story of Reuben Carter has been told all over the place. And we talk about after losing, going to the 3rd fight with Dick Tiger, caused all kinds of controversy all over the place. And Giardello, that's why Giardello said, I don't want to fight Dick Tiger, because there's some of the ringside who felt Tiger was slighted. And that's why Tiger wanted the rematch immediately. Now we talk about this particular fight. This time, it didn't matter because Tiger came after Giardello, and Giardello basically backpedaled the entire fight. And even though Giardello is a good fighter, they say there's levels to this. Dick Tiger showed there was levels to this because he came after Giardello methodically and casually, knowing that he had this fight his. And Dick Tiger, we talk about some of the premier great middleweights, is certainly up there, and he showed it on this night when he regained the middleweight championship for the 2nd time, when he won the 4th of this 4-fight series, which was split 2-2, which should have been 3-1, which everyone knows. The 3rd fight that took place in Atlantic City, Dick Tiger should have been given the nod. Everyone at ringside thought Giardello was handed a gift. It's not a slot on Giardello, who's a good fighter. Dick Tiger legitimately won that third fight. But in the fourth fight, he said, heck with it. I'm taking over. I'm controlling this from start to finish. And that's why he was able to regain the middleweight championship. Now he transferred back to his Giardello's probably his last finest hour when he beat Rubin Carter. Everybody knows the story of Rubin Carter. That's been chronicled. There's a documentary and a movie about it. You can watch it on Netflix or whatever. But in this fight, Giardello just pummeled Rubin Carter. It was probably his last finest hour. And basically, in that fight with Rubin Carter and Giardello, makes you wonder if basically he knew his 5 minutes of fame were up because he basically let it all hang out on Carter before Dick Tiger came around and got back what was rightfully his, the undisputed middleweight championship of the world. We talk about the top middleweights of all time. I mean, the top is a no-brainer. I mean, Sugar Ray Robinson, Carlos Monzon, Jake LaMotta, Harry Greb, the toy bulldog Mickey Walker, Marvelous Marvin Hagler, Bernard Hopkins. There's a spot there for Dick Tiger in the top 10, and he belongs. I mean, to do it twice in his career. We talk about the guys he beat. I mean, it was no powder puff of a ranking puff either. I mean, he beat some credible guys to win during his 2 reigns as middleweight champ. Of course, known for the 3-fight series with Gene Fullmer, but of course, Fulmer's on his downturn. But all credit to Tiger for taking advantage of it. He of course lost to Giardello. Had a mediocre way the rest of the way until he decided to beat Giardello to regain the title. Lost to Emil Griffith. And we talk about after the loss of Griffith, looked like his career was done. But what does he do? He goes up to light heavyweight and stuns Jose Torres as a 6-1 underdog. And mind you, back in the 60s, you were a 6-1 underdog. It was classified as a significant upset. And that was in the backyard of Jose Torres of New York City. And for all your fight fanatics, especially the Mike Tyson fans, before Cus D'Amato discovered Mike Tyson, one of his original projects was Jose Torres. And Dick Tiger just beat him to win the title. Won a rematch over him under some odd circumstances. But then his end came when the great Bob Foster just starts him with a left hook. But one of the more underrated and stronger fighters of his time, Dick Tiger, was certainly an all-time great middleweight. One of the 75 greatest fighters on the Ring Magazine list that came out not too long ago. Certainly fits that bill. Definitely top 10 in the middleweight division. Career second to none. A terrific, terrific fighter. And it was 60 years ago today. He went back to the top of the pedestal in the middleweight division when he just basically sent Joey Giardello backwards from start to finish to win the middleweight championship. After feeling like the third fight between the two, he was wronged. A terrific, terrific fighter and a fascinating story. The guy lived in Nigeria for the longest time, moved to London, and the story sort of paralleled Alexis Arguello's. If you know the story of Arguello and the culture they had over there at Nicaragua when he moved from there to Florida, same situation with Tiger when he moved from Nicaragua to England. And Dick Tiger, from there, his career took off. I mean, it's a terrific record, 16-19-3. Definitely a Hall of Famer. I mean, got some solid wins, not just the 3 with Fulmer and the 2 of the 4 with Giardello. Beat the one-time standout Neo Beneventi. Also stopped. Himself beat Rubin Carter and beat Don Fulmer. It was a really good established career at middleweight. Definitely a top 10 all-time great middleweight. Maybe the lower half of it, but he's certainly up there with the all-time great middleweights, and it's not talked about enough. Maybe a top 25 all-time underrated career, because a guy like him, I mean, he was chiseled out of stone, one of the harder heads and harder chins you could have. Says a lot about Bob Foster was able to starch him, but that was might be a different weight class and Dick Tiger's downturn. But one of the stronger, more underrated fighters was Dick Tiger, a tough out for anyone in any era, and he can cut it, and he could cut it well. And he was chiseled. Look at this frame. I mean, there's that black and white frames of Dick Tiger on the internet. Check it out. For a guy at that weight class at that time, he was well chiseled, and he was stronger as heck. I mean, that's one of the things Gene Fulmer said. This guy is strong as heck. And I couldn't deal with it. And Joey Giardello found out in the 4th of this 4-fight series when Dick Tiger, gathered himself up, put it all together to just basically handle business against Joey Giardello to regain the World Middleweight Championship for a second time of his all-time great career. A terrific fighter was Dick Tiger, born as Richard Yehu. Couldn't go on about his time with the war and the wildness in Nigeria and Africa. Arguably the distinction of the greatest fighter to come out of the continent of Africa when you consider his accomplishments. And we tell about some of the guys that came out of there, like Azuma Nelson and Ike Quartet, just to name a couple. Probably could have the distinction because of his significance and his reign as the middleweight champion of the world. And we talk about the old school 8 in the weight classes. The Tiger won the titles as part of the old school 8. Remember, he went straight from middleweight to light heavyweight when he shocked Jose Torres a couple years later. That should tell you a lot about Dick Tiger. Must read about, because the guy was a sensational. I mean, and real interesting too. I mean, real interesting, real fascinating, and one of the real good ones. Not talked about enough among the all-time great middleweights, but probably as criminally underrated as anybody all time. Certainly belongs in that conversation. And on that note, I will wrap up this edition of Sir Hunt on X. If you missed this episode tonight or any others, you can catch the replays on the Apple Podcasts, the iHeartRadio apps, and the video replay can be seen on the Spotify app if you have that. Also, the Patreon account will be launched here within the matter of weeks. And of course, the rebranding that comes in after the new year. The gloves are coming off, and you thought I was going to take them off already? I haven't taken them all the way off. Starting 2026, they're coming all the way off. Everyone's been warned. And as always, you make self-care your number one priority in all walks of life. Always, always focus on you first. If you take care of you first, all the good things will come your way. If you don't take care of yourself first, nothing else matters. Focus on you, take care of you, good things will come. Only thing that matters. Have a good rest of the night. Take care of yourselves. God bless. And I will see you tomorrow night.